The wind sweeps across a vast, snow-covered valley. Footprints, small, uneven, fading, trail through the white silence. Somewhere beyond the frost, a cry echoes. Faint, trembling. The kind of cry that only the lonely can hear. An old man, wrapped in a weathered coat, trudges through the snow with his lantern. He's lived in this remote cabin for years, away from noise, away from people, away from the world that forgot him. But tonight, the wilderness whispers something different. He pauses. That sound again. Soft, broken, desperate. He follows it through the howling wind until he sees it. A tiny wolf pup, half buried in snow, one leg twisted and bleeding. Its breaths are shallow. The old man kneels beside it. The pup tries to snarl, a weak growl, brave but afraid. The old man whispers gently, "Easy now, little one. You're safe." He wraps the trembling creature in his scarf and carries it home through the storm. The lantern light flickers against the walls of the cabin as he sets the pup by the fire. For the first time in years, the old man has company. Days turn into weeks. The pup slowly heals, learning to walk, to trust, to play. It follows the man everywhere, to the river, the woods, even when he chops firewood in the morning light. Their world becomes one of quiet companionship. Sometimes the man looks at the pup and smiles, whispering to himself, "Guess I'm not so alone anymore." But nature never forgets its call.
The forest lay silent, wrapped beneath a quilt of snow. Each branch, each blade of frozen grass, carried the weight of winter's stillness. The air was so cold it seemed to hum, that sharp, biting sound that comes when the world itself is holding its breath. In that silence, high in the northern mountains, stood a tiny cabin, wooden walls weathered by countless storms, a roof sagging under snow, and smoke rising thinly from a crooked chimney, the only sign of life in miles of frozen wilderness. Inside, an old man sat by the fire. His name was Elias. The flames flickered across his face, tracing lines carved deep by time and solitude. His hands, once strong, were rough and trembling now. He turned a piece of wood in his palms, not carving, just holding it, as if the act of working had long since lost its purpose. Outside, the storm began to whisper again, the kind of whisper that only the lonely truly hear. Elias had lived alone for many winters, too many to count. The world he once knew, a world of laughter, of voices echoing through the trees, had gone quiet long ago. There were photographs pinned to the cabin wall, their corners curling with age. A young woman with wild hair and gentle eyes. A boy, perhaps 10, holding a fishing rod and grinning. Both smiling, both gone. He rarely looked at them now. Not because he didn't remember, but because remembering hurt too much. Every morning, Elias rose before dawn, fed the fire, stepped outside, and greeted the world like an old friend who rarely spoke back. He would check his traps, not for sport, but for survival. He would walk down to the frozen creek, break the ice, and watch the sunrise burn faintly through the mist. And every night, he would sit by that same fire, listen to it crackle, and whisper into the flames, "Still here." That morning was no different, until it was. Elias had gone farther than usual, past the line of pines where even the deer no longer ventured. The snow was knee-deep, and the wind cut through his coat like a blade. He was about to turn back when he heard it, a sound so soft, so fragile, it nearly vanished beneath the wind. It wasn't the cry of a bird or the rustle of trees, it was smaller, weaker, a whimper. Elias stopped, his old heart tightening. He held his breath and listened. There it was again, a faint, pitiful sound carried on the wind. He followed it, pushing through the drifts, his boots crunching into the snow. As he drew closer, the sound grew clearer, broken gasps, like someone fighting the cold itself. Then he saw it. Beneath a fallen log, half buried in snow, was a small bundle of fur, trembling, struggling to move. A wolf pup. Elias froze. The memory of old hunts flickered in his mind. Days when wolves were the enemy, when men like him carried rifles instead of compassion. But this creature, it wasn't a threat. It was dying. He knelt slowly beside it. The pup's eyes opened, cloudy, desperate, full of pain. One leg twisted unnaturally, blood staining the snow beneath it. Its breathing was shallow. Elias looked around. No sign of a pack, no tracks, only wind. The little one had been left behind, or worse, its family lost. He could walk away. That would be easier. Let nature take its course, as the forest always demanded. But then, as he looked into those trembling eyes, he saw something. A reflection. Not of the wolf, of himself. Lonely, wounded, barely holding on. Elias took off his coat, his breath coming in clouds, and gently scooped the pup into his arms. It whimpered weakly, then went still, its head pressed against his chest. He could feel its tiny heartbeat. Faint, but still there. "Easy now," he whispered. "You're safe, little one." The walk back felt endless. Snow lashed his face, his boots slipping on the ice. More than once he thought he might fall, that the weight of the pup and his years might bring him down. But every time he felt his strength fade, he felt that heartbeat again, and kept going. When he finally reached the cabin, Elias pushed open the door with his shoulder, stumbled inside, and set the bundle by the fire. The pup lay motionless. He tore off his gloves and fed the flames, the fire roaring to life. He melted snow in an old kettle, warmed his hands, and gently dabbed the pup's wounds with a damp cloth. Then, from his pantry, he pulled what little meat he had, rabbit stew, and shredded a few pieces into a bowl. He held one between his fingers, lowering it to the pup's mouth. At first, there was nothing. Then, a twitch, a faint movement. The pup licked weakly at his hand, its tiny tongue cold as ice. Elias smiled for the first time in months. "Good, that's it. You'll be all right." The night deepened. The fire burned low. Elias leaned back in his chair, eyes heavy, the sound of the storm outside fading to nothing. He looked at the pup again, now sleeping beside the hearth, chest rising and falling. Something stirred in the old man's heart. Something he hadn't felt in years. A quiet warmth, a reason to wake up tomorrow. That night, as the wind howled across the valley and the stars glimmered faintly above the frozen peaks, two souls, one human, one wild, found each other by the light of a single fire. And neither of them knew it yet. But this meeting, born in the heart of winter, would thaw more than snow. It would awaken hope. Hope that even in life's coldest seasons, warmth can still return. Morning crept slowly over the mountains, painting the world in soft shades of silver and pale gold. The storm had passed, leaving behind a calm so complete it almost felt sacred. Snowflakes still drifted down lazily, glimmering in the first light of dawn. Inside the cabin, the fire still crackled gently. The little wolf stirred, letting out a small, tired whine. Elias, who had been dozing in his chair, opened his eyes. His back ached, but the sight before him made him smile. The pup was alive. He leaned forward, speaking softly, his voice carrying the warmth of a grandfather. "Morning, little one." The pup blinked up at him, uncertain, wary, but no longer afraid. Elias reached out a slow, steady hand. The pup sniffed his fingers, then, after a moment of hesitation, rested its head back on the blanket. A silent understanding passed between them. No words, just survival, and trust beginning to take root. Over the next few days, Elias cared for the pup as though it were a fragile flame he couldn't afford to lose. He cleaned the wound every morning, wrapping it gently with strips of cloth torn from his old shirts. He boiled snow water and mashed rabbit meat until it was soft enough for the pup to eat. At first, it refused food. Then, slowly, it began to accept. Small bites at first, then more eagerly, until Elias had to ration his own meals to keep the little creature fed. He didn't mind. For the first time in years, his cabin wasn't silent anymore. There were sounds again, tiny paws shifting on the wooden floor, a soft whine when the fire burned too low. Occasionally, a bark so small it made him laugh, rusty and cracked from disuse. Elias started talking more, to the pup, to himself, to the world. "Guess it's you and me, huh?" he'd say as he stirred the fire. "You'll have to learn how to walk again. But don't worry, we'll get there." He named the pup Ash because of its gray fur and the way it had come into his life, out of the ashes of loneliness. As the days turned into weeks, the bond between man and wolf grew stronger. Every morning, Elias would open the cabin door and let Ash sit on the threshold, sniffing the wind. The little wolf would lift its nose, eyes bright, ears twitching at every sound, birds calling, trees creaking, snow shifting. But it never wandered far. Not yet. Its leg was healing, though still weak. Elias built a small brace from soft leather and wood, tying it carefully so Ash could put weight on it without pain. The pup limped at first, unsure, then managed a few wobbly steps. Elias clapped his hands softly, pride lighting his weathered face. "That's it! You're walking, my boy, you're walking!" Ash wagged his tail, not like a dog, but with a slow, cautious movement that carried meaning. Gratitude. One afternoon, the sky turned a pale blue, and the forest shimmered with frost. Elias decided it was time to take Ash outside properly. He wrapped himself in his coat, opened the door, and stepped into the brilliance of the snow-covered world. Ash followed, his paws sinking deep into the white powder. For a moment, he froze, overwhelmed. The vastness of it all, the brightness, the wind carrying 1,000 new scents. Then, with a sudden burst of life, he leapt forward, nose down, tail flicking, pouncing at the snow like it was alive. Elias laughed. A deep, genuine laugh, the kind that had not escaped his chest in years. He watched as Ash rolled, stumbled, and then barked at a bird flying overhead. The old man's heart swelled. For the first time, the forest didn't feel empty anymore. Days passed like this, small moments of joy stitched together with quiet companionship. Elias chopped wood while Ash watched, head tilted, as if trying to understand the strange habits of humans. When Elias fished at the frozen creek, Ash would sit beside him, watching the water ripple beneath the ice. At night, they'd sit by the fire, the wolf curled close to the man's boots, both warmed by more than flame. There was a peace between them, something raw, wordless, and pure. But every bond, even one born from healing, carries the shadow of change. One morning, Elias noticed Ash sitting by the window, staring out toward the woods. His ears twitched, his body seemed tense, alert. "What is it, boy?" Elias asked softly. Ash didn't move. His golden eyes were fixed on the horizon, where the forest met the mountains. A place Elias rarely went anymore. That night, the pup didn't sleep near the fire. He lay by the door instead, restless, listening to the call of the wind. Something in that sound stirred old instincts, something wild, something that didn't belong within walls. Elias watched in silence. He knew what it meant. The wolf's body might have healed, but the wild inside him had never left. And deep down, Elias felt a quiet ache. He knew that one day, this creature he'd come to love would have to leave, to return to the life that called from beyond the trees. Still, he smiled. "Not yet," he whispered, kneeling beside Ash and scratching gently behind his ear. "Just a little longer." The pup licked his hand, a single soft gesture that spoke louder than words. And that night, as snow fell gently outside, the two slept side by side, man and wolf, warmth and wilderness, bound by something greater than fate. They didn't yet know what awaited them beyond those trees. A moment that would test their bond and their hearts in ways neither could imagine. Winter deepened. The mountains grew quieter, the air heavier, and the forest floor sank beneath layers of untouched snow. The trees stood like frozen sentinels, their branches glittering with ice. Inside the cabin, Elias and Ash had found a rhythm, a gentle pattern of shared days. The old man would rise before dawn, light the fire, and pour snow into a pot to melt. Ash would stretch, yawn, and circle twice before settling by the door, his breath misting in the cold. It had been nearly 2 moons since that stormy night, the night their lives had crossed. Ash had grown stronger. The limp was almost gone, replaced by a graceful, sure-footed stride. His fur had thickened into a silvery coat that shimmered when the light hit it just right. His eyes, once clouded with pain, now glowed with wild brilliance, gold and deep as the forest itself. Elias saw it every day, that wild spark. The same one he once saw in himself, before time and loss had tamed his spirit. One morning, the silence broke with a sound neither had heard before. A long, haunting howl echoed across the valley, distant, yet unmistakable. Ash froze. His ears perked, tail lifted, body rigid with alertness. Elias stopped chopping wood and looked up. He knew that sound. Another wolf. Maybe more. Ash's head tilted, his breath quickening. Something ancient stirred inside him, a recognition older than memory, older than man itself. "Easy now," Elias said softly, setting down his axe. "They're far away." But the pup didn't move. His eyes stayed locked on the horizon, where the echo of that call faded into the wind. That night, Ash didn't eat much. He paced near the door, restless, staring at the trees like he was waiting for something. Or someone. Elias watched him, heart heavy. He had known this would come. The forest was calling its child home. Days passed, and the howls grew nearer, weaving through the nights like whispers of destiny. Ash became more distant. He would sit by the window for hours, ears twitching to the faintest sound. Sometimes, Elias would see his reflection in the glass, the young wolf's face overlaid with his own tired eyes, two souls caught between past and purpose. One dawn, Elias opened the door to fetch firewood. Ash slipped out quietly behind him. The air was crisp and sharp. Snow glimmered under the pale sun. Ash padded through it slowly, then stopped near the edge of the woods. He turned his head, looking back at Elias, as if waiting for permission. The old man's throat tightened. He wanted to say no. He wanted to tell him to stay, to promise that the forest wasn't safe, that life out there would be hard and lonely. But he couldn't, because the wild does not belong to walls. He took a slow breath and said softly, "Go on, boy. The world's waiting." Ash hesitated, then trotted forward, paws sinking into the snow. He stopped again, looking back one last time. Their eyes met, and in that single silent moment, everything was said. Then the wolf disappeared into the trees. The cabin felt emptier than ever. Elias sat by the fire that night, listening to the wind howl through the cracks. Every creak of wood, every whisper outside made his heart twitch with hope that maybe Ash would return. Days turned into weeks. The forest stayed quiet. The loneliness came back like an old ache. But something was different this time. Elias found himself talking to the world again. To the trees, the snow, the mountains. To the memory of a pup that had taught him to care again. Sometimes he'd leave scraps of food outside, near the edge of the woods. Not because he expected Ash to come back, but because it felt right. One night, the wind rose sharply, a blizzard coming fast. Elias gathered what firewood he could and shut the door tight. But just as he was about to sit down, he heard it, a sound that made his heart leap. A soft whine, right outside the cabin. He rushed to the door and pulled it open. There, against the swirl of snow, stood Ash. Larger now, stronger, his fur thick and glistening with frost. And beside him, two more wolves, standing at a distance, eyes watching carefully. Ash stepped forward, lowering his head slightly, a gesture both wild and familiar. Elias knelt in the doorway, smiling through tears. "You came back," he whispered. The wolf pressed his muzzle briefly against the old man's arm, then turned to look at the others waiting beyond the light. Elias nodded. "I see. You're not alone anymore." Ash took a step back, eyes meeting his one last time, a silent thank you. Then he turned, running into the storm with his kin, their shapes vanishing into the white. That night Elias didn't feel sad, he felt whole. He knew that somewhere out there, in the vast wild, a part of him was running free too, through the snow, through the wind, through the heart of winter itself. And every so often, when the night grew quiet and the fire burned low, a distant howl would rise across the mountains. It wasn't a goodbye, it was a promise. The winter slowly loosened its grip on the mountains. The rivers, once locked in ice, began to sing again, soft at first, then louder as the days grew longer. The trees wore buds of green, The sky turned a clearer blue, and the air smelled of new beginnings. Elias still lived alone in his little cabin by the valley. His days were quiet, filled with the hum of life returning. The snow had melted around the house, revealing the earth, dark, rich, and alive. He would sit outside every morning with a tin cup of tea, watching the mist drift over the forest below. It was peaceful. But the silence carried something more now. Not loneliness, but memory. He often thought about Ash, about the night they met, the wound, the first fire, and that final moment in the storm. It felt like yesterday, and a lifetime ago. Sometimes, when he walked through the forest, he'd find traces, paw prints faint in the mud, a broken twig, a shadow that flickered just beyond sight. And he knew. They were there. The wolves had come back to this part of the valley, not as ghosts, but as guardians of their home. Elias smiled at the thought. "Good," he'd whisper. "You made it." One morning, as the fog lifted, Elias noticed something near the tree line, a movement quick and silent. He squinted, hand over his brow. A wolf stood there, watching him from the mist. Its coat was a familiar shade of silver, though streaked with darker tones now, older, wiser. Ash. Their eyes met across the field. And then, beside Ash, two smaller shapes appeared, young wolves, curious and bright. They looked around, then up at him. Elias felt his throat tighten, his chest warm with something too deep for words. He raised a hand, trembling slightly. "Hello there," he said softly. Ash gave a small tilt of the head, almost like a nod. Then he turned, leading his family back into the trees. Elias stood there long after they vanished, the sunlight touching his face, the wind whispering through the grass. The seasons continued to turn. The old man's hair grew whiter, his steps slower, but every spring, without fail, he'd leave a few pieces of meat by the forest edge, not as an offering, but as a friendship kept alive through time. Sometimes, he'd hear howls at night, echoing faintly from the hills. Other times, when he walked by the river, he'd see reflections in the water, shapes moving just out of reach, watching quietly from afar. It was enough. He didn't need more, because deep down, he understood something simple and eternal. Love, no matter how brief, leaves tracks that never fade. Years passed, and the valley changed again. Trees taller, rivers wider, animals thriving. The wolves were no longer feared here. They were part of the rhythm, the balance of the wild. One morning, the people from the nearby village found Elias's cabin empty. The fire burned out, the door slightly open, his old cane leaning by the chair. But outside, near the forest edge, they found something unusual. A circle of paw prints around his footprints, pressed deep into the earth, as if the forest itself had come to say goodbye. And when the night fell over the valley, the moon rose high and silver. A long, gentle howl echoed from the mountains, carrying through the trees, across the rivers, through every heart that had once been touched by kindness. A call not of sorrow, but of peace. The story of an old man and a wolf pup, whispered forever by the wild.